Hey, everybody, welcome to the channel. Today, I get to talk to a very special guest. Her name is Night Owl, and her and I and Sarah met on the Appalachian Trail last year during our through hike. Night Owl, welcome to the channel.
Hi, thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. So, you're going to be my first guest on this attempt at podcasting.
Yes, I'm honored.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed the time that Sarah and I spent with you on trail. Well, you're an interesting woman. You've got so much to talk about regarding your experience on the trail, and I can't wait to hear some of these stories. I mean, I've heard most of them already, but I can't wait to hear them again. And then also want to hear towards the end about your business. I know you have a business that you started up, which focuses on women and hiking on the Appalachian Trail and other trails across the country. So when did we first meet?
Yeah, so we first met at Uncle Johnny's in Irwin, Tennessee, right after Hot Springs. And it was in the gear shop at Uncle Johnny's. I had a really awesome umbrella that I loved. It was probably one of my top 5 favorite pieces of gear, but the system that I had to attach it to my pack just wasn't working. And so I was trying to see if they had some sort of like bungee cord or something at the gear shop. And Compass had heard me talking to the clerk and came over, and she had like a little bungee toggle. I think it was off of her rain jacket, and she gave it to me, and it was like friends at first sight. And I just really connected with you guys. I liked your hiking style. I liked that you were a husband and wife couple. I had hiked with Josh and Elizabeth
That's
for a
right.
few weeks prior to meeting you guys, and it was just kind of like a family vibe. It was like a comfortable environment. You guys were just like my kind of people, and I realized that right away. And so, yeah, it was fun hiking with you guys for some time after that.
Yeah, and I remember that moment we met because we overheard you in the store, and you were asking for some type of keeper like you described, and I knew Sarah had something, and so I said, "Well, go talk to her and offer it to her." And that's the great thing about the hiking community, the trail community, is if you need something and someone hears that you need it, they will find you and usually offer that piece of equipment or something, whatever it is you need.
100%. And that little bungee toggle that Sarah gave me went all the way to Katahdin with me, kept my umbrella in place, and I still have it to this day. So whenever I pull that out, I think of you guys.
Yeah. Now you live in Wisconsin, correct?
I do, yep.
And what was your start date?
I started pretty early like you guys. I flew down to Georgia on the 27th, stayed in Dahlonega that night, and then I hit the trail on the 20th. I wanted to start early just because as a hiking guide, a lot of my guiding is done in the fall on the back end of the year when the weather's nice, the bugs are a lot less. It's just really favorable conditions to hike in the fall. So that's kind of when I do a lot of my guiding. So I wanted to get done with the trail with enough time to get home, rest for a few weeks, and then start guiding. So I did start early. I'm glad there were some really cold nights in the beginning. We had a couple snowstorms, a couple ice storms, but I learned really early on if weather was coming, that's when I kind of got off trail. I went to a hostel, I went to a hotel. I learned that I didn't mind hiking in that during the day, but sleeping in that at night is like a whole different story. So my strategy was, I knew the weather was going to be more challenging starting early, but I also knew I was just going to get off trail on those nights.
Right, right. And as a or a solo female hiker, what kind of plan did you have in place for yourself regarding your safety?
Sure. Safety is super important for anybody, but especially being a solo female hiker. I always had my Garmin InReach Mini on me, so I could use my SOS button at any time. Even when I didn't have cell coverage, I could text my husband off of my InReach Mini, just let him know, I got to camp, I'm safe for the night. He always knew my whereabouts, along with 2 other friends that I always location shared with. I started out with bear spray. Not necessarily for bears. I always call it like weirdo spray.
That's good.
More more so for humans, but I ended up ditching my bear spray in Hot Springs, North Carolina. My husband had driven down with our 3 dogs to come visit me, and I just felt at that stage I'd probably been on trail 3 or 4 weeks. I felt very safe. I didn't feel like I needed the bear spray for bears or for weirdos at that point. I have a knife on me at all times, which I keep, very readily available in my pocket. Did carry, once I got rid of my bear spray, I did carry like a small little mace, again, just for humans more so than animals. And, just being smart on trail. I never really met anybody too sketchy or other than my night alone with the homeless man. Um, and,
Yeah,
and that's a whole,
I definitely want to hear that story. But to your point about safety plans, like even I started hiking with my sister Michelle and Sarah Compass, and I still had a general safety plan. For example, we tried our best not to camp at road crossings near
yes.
trailheads. The easy access for locals to drive their vehicles or their off-road vehicles, particularly at night when there'd be drinking or maybe even some drug use going on. So that was like a pretty much a no-go for us was to camp at road crossings. There was one time the day before we went up into Max Patch. It was just worked out where we wanted to see a sunrise on Max Patch, so we wanted to get as close as we could, and I ended up finding some pretty good campsites, maybe 100 yards from a road crossing. So we were further enough back from it where I felt safe. But at, you know, 11:30, 12 o'clock, 11:30 at night, 12 a.m., we heard a group of, 4x4s. They were super loud and came tearing down that road, but we were far enough away. So again, I think having plans like that are important.
Yep. Yeah, I never hitchhiked by myself. I mean, I only hitchhiked a few times on trail and I was always with a group or other people. I never felt really unsafe on the trail in general. It was more like you said, you go into town and, sure, there's weirdos in town. And I would say if I ever felt like on edge, it would be more like in town versus on the trail.
Now, I want to talk about this. It's so easy to get off trail when you're hiking the Appalachian Trail. I mean, hopefully you're hoping it's just for a short amount of time. But I remember, I don't know if we had it was the day that we got into the Boots Off Hostel. So we were making our way to Boots Off Hostel. You were behind us or ahead of us
I was
at
behind you
that.
guys.
Okay, you were behind us, and it was a tough climb. So talk about that because I know you got off trail and then you ended up encountering somebody.
Yeah, yeah, that was a good day, but it was a challenging day. I remember, we started out and I want to say probably an hour or so behind you guys, but so beautiful stopping at Laurel Falls there. I remember
Yes.
I stopped and had a snack and it was again the first really nice, warm, sunny day we had. And then right after you get past Laurel Falls, I think it's Pond Mountain that you start, it's like a couple mile climb, but it's a lot of switchbacks going up the
Yes.
mountain. And at the time, I thought it was so challenging, but, like, after finishing the whole AT, I look back and I'm like, "Oh, that's cute. I thought that was hard." Like, give me that any day, compared to New Hampshire or Maine.
For sure.
But I missed one of the switchbacks. I think I just had my head down and I was grinding and it was hot, and so I kept going straight instead of switchbacking over. And, the trail kinda got a little bit more narrow, a little bit more rustic, but didn't really, seem like I was too far off trail. And then, like, again, it was so hot, I was kinda just dreaming of, like, a cold Gatorade or a cold Coke, and I look up and I see, like, a pop-up tent ahead on trail, and I see, like, a blue tarp, and in my delusional mind, I'm thinking like, "Oh my gosh, somebody set up trail magic, my dreams are coming true, I'm gonna get that Gatorade."
Yeah.
And, as I start to get closer to this, like, pop-up tent and tarp, I start to see, like, a ton of litter, and I'm like, "Huh, well, that doesn't seem right, like, I don't know why there's so much litter." And then I see this, like, trespasser warning, "No trespassing" sign, and I hear, like, somebody in this tent tarp structure, and that's when I realize, like, "Duh, Liz, this is not trail magic, this is, like, somebody transient who's, living in this pop-up tent and tarp."
On the top of
And,
the mountain.
the side of a mountain.
Yeah.
And so just seeing the weird signs that were up and the no trespassing and whatnot, I thought, this seems really strange. So I'm gonna announce myself, make my presence known, and get the hell out of here. So, I just was like, oh boy, I took a wrong turn and I got lost. I'm turning around now. And, I just turned around and got the hell out of there, made it up and over Pond Mountain, and then when we were talking to the, Boots Off, hostel owner, he's like, "You found Ratman's encampment."
I know I was worried about you after, particularly after we started hearing the stories from him,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
guess he's, like, throwing rocks at people or spit at them or had
I
some
guess
encounters.
in the past, the owner of Boots Off Hostel had said that he had thrown rocks at hikers and stuff. And it sounds like someone from either the National Park Service or the local law enforcement, or maybe even the owner of Boots Off Hostel. Somebody had a conversation with him and I think convinced him it was in his best interests to, if he was going to be living in that situation, to not be, drawing attention to himself.
Yeah,
Yeah. That was freaky though. I mean, to hear that story, because, again, it's different when you realize you're off trail, you know,
yep,
and then you just don't know. You just don't know
yep,
what you're going to encounter.
yep.
And
Did you
then
guys
just a
get did you
go ahead.
guys get lost or off trail at all?
Yeah, I mean, I went off trail, but generally didn't get off trail for long before I realized. I think the farthest I had gone was I was in the Shennys, and I hated those sign posts in the Shennys. They were more like marking posts, concrete posts, and then they had
Mhm.
the metal band around the sides, and then imprinted on the metal band was the information about mileage to shelters and mileage to different locations. And I read later that the purpose of all that is to leave less obvious signs like white blazes and big signs. They want to make it, well, I guess, more pristine. But it was frustrating for all of us over 50 who need glasses.
I couldn't see them either. I'd literally have to get right up and, like, read them. They were so hard to
Yeah.
read.
Yeah. So I was bitching and moaning about that through the whole Shennys. But I ended up going down the wrong trail, I think point 7. And that's when I realized, because I came across the water source. And the way the AT makes its way through the Shennys, it doesn't take you by a lot of water sources. And so I knew I wasn't supposed to run into water that day for miles. And all of a sudden, I have this great water source in front of me, point 0.7 from this road crossing. And I said, I'm off trail. So that's probably the furthest I went. The other story that you told me later on trail, I don't remember where you were, but you actually got to a shelter site and you spent the night in a shelter with someone who I believe was a homeless man. And the exchange was just, can you share that?
Yeah, I think it was the day that we kinda said goodbye to each other, and, it was my first 20-mile day, and I didn't end up getting to it was Trimpey Shelter in Virginia. I didn't end up getting there until, like, 7 or 7:30 at night, and that's one of the areas that was really, really devastated by Hurricane Helene, so, I mean, just trees down everywhere, not a lot of great places to tent. I think Trimpey was, like, one of the further off trail shelters. I wanna say it was, like, a third of a mile or maybe even a half mile. You kinda went down, but I knew I needed to go down there because I needed water, and again, there wasn't, any water sources thereafter, so I'm like, "Oh, I'll go." As I, kinda hiked down, I was looking in the far out notes, and it said that, like, there was one kinda decent tent space because usually I'd stay in my tent versus a shelter. I just liked having my own privacy, my own space.
Yes.
I didn't really like sleeping in shelters because people snore, somebody's always digging through their bag, somebody's always getting up and leaving at, like, 5 AM, like, I just never really slept well in shelters, so I'd only do it if there was weather or, other circumstances. I'd read in the far out notes that, like, the one area where there was no downed trees and you could tent, somebody had norovirus and they'd had an accident in that area, so they had this huge note in far out, like, "Do not tent there. I had an
Uh-huh.
accident. I'm so sorry." So I was like, "Okay, I'll stay in the shelter." And I got there, and again, it was like 7:30 at night. So usually most people would be there and set up for the evening. There was nobody there. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be at this shelter by myself tonight. And I start unpacking, I start making dinner. And it was one of those shelters that has second story like bunk. And I see this movement and I hear this movement. And I look up and this head pops out of a sleeping bag. And it was this dude who I'd never seen before, and, he just was like, "Oh, hey," and I was like, "Oh, hi, I didn't hear you up there. Sorry if I woke you up," and he's like, "Oh, no problem," and kinda was just laying in his sleeping bag. I continued to make dinner and, start to unload my stuff, and I kept, like, looking around being like, "I don't know this guy." He seems, innocent enough. There's gotta be more people coming to camp. I was just kinda waiting, got some water, and, then I was like, "Well, I'm gonna put my food away. I guess I'm committed. I'm gonna stay here tonight." So, I said to this dude, I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go put my stuff down in the bear box. Do you want me to take anything down there for you so you don't have to get out of your sleeping bag?" And he was like, "No, no, I should get up." And that's when he got out of his sleeping bag that I kinda realized, like, he was more I don't know if he was, like, transient, drifter, homeless. I don't
Mhm.
know what category you'd put him into. Um, but I noticed he had on, like, blue jeans. Your average hiker does not wear
Yeah,
blue jeans.
right.
He had a necktie, holding his pants up, just, a hooded cotton sweatshirt. Like, he just didn't have typical hiking clothes on, and he didn't have very much gear, and the only thing he put in the bear box was just, like, this gigantic tub of peanut butter, and at that point, that's when I was like, "Oh gosh," like, this is not really somebody in the hiking community. And, we started chatting a little, and he started to ask me if I was afraid out by myself. And at this point, I'd gotten that question so many times on trail that I just kind of learned to flip it back around. Like if a guy's asking me if I'm afraid, I'm like, no, are you afraid? I kind
Right.
of just put it right back on their plate. And his response was, no, I'm not afraid except for the paranormal stuff.
God.
That's when I was like, "Oh gosh, we're going there, aren't we?" And so I was like, "Well, what do you mean paranormal stuff?" And he's like, "Oh, like skinwalkers." And I'm like, "What's a skinwalker? I don't Is that like a serial killer?" And he's like, "Worse, I don't even wanna tell you because you won't sleep tonight." And I'm like, "Well, like try me because I'm not afraid of paranormal stuff."
Right.
And so, when I brought up the serial killer thing, he actually paused and looked at me and he said, "Night Owl, are you a serial killer?" And I just, like, thought he was joking, and I kinda paused as well and, like, made a joke out of it because things were starting to get a little weird, and I said, "No, I'm not a serial killer. Are you?" And then he had a very pregnant pause and, was like, "No. No, definitely not. No, definitely not." And then again, I made a joke like, "Ah, what would the odds of 2 of us, be out here?" And so after that, I just got I got really weird vibes, and my strategy at that point was, I just kept talking about how, "Oh, yeah, I gotta, text my husband, he knows where I am. Oh, if you hear anybody coming, it's my friends. They're, tenting somewhere around here." I just made it very well known that, like, I wasn't alone that night and people knew my whereabouts. Turned out to actually be a very nice, just wayward young man, and again, my strategy was just to befriend him, so if he did decide to murder me or anything, maybe he'd feel bad about it and think twice about it, but no, all joking aside, he was a very nice person, just a very wayward person. I think like a lot of us trying to find healing or trying to find community or trying to find purpose on the trail, and we talked quite a
Yeah,
bit into the night.
I think you handled that situation really well, and you gave me a lot more details today. I think you related to him and probably put him at his mind at some ease because who knows what he's thinking about with you, and I think, the other options if you had really felt you could have pushed on, correct? I mean, you would have packed up and pushed on. It would have been dark at that point. I think, depending on the situation, that's always a good option to just walk away from that.
Yep.
but it sounds like
That's
you
what I
handled it really well.
that's what I learned about that situation, that thought crossed my mind that night, but I also, this is probably so haphazard to say, and maybe you felt the same way, but there were days where I was just so tired I didn't care. Like, there
Yeah.
were so many things, like, in normal life, it'd be like, "Oh, I would have done this differently, this differently, this differently." Sometimes you're just so tired that you're just like, "Well, I guess this is just the way it is." But, yeah, if I would have felt like any, like, imminent threat, I definitely would have moved on, and I learned that from that night. Like, if there's ever a situation that you're not 100% sure of or not comfortable with, you just keep moving, and that's the best way to deal with things.
Yeah, I found that to be the case, even with weather. Like, I know you spent the night on top of Roan Mountain in a horrible storm, and Sarah and I, you were behind us at that point, and we had gotten to the tenting site at the top of Roan Mountain, or just about to the top, shy of the summit, and the weather was so bad. I mean, the wind and the rain and the temperature was dropping, and we just found ourselves in a situation where it wasn't going to be a good night to try and stay up there in that weather. And it was early enough. I want to say it was still light, so it was probably like 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I could see that the stress that Sarah and I were under, and I just made the decision. I had looked on far out already. We were only 3.5 miles from a road crossing. And so I was able to communicate with my sister Michelle, text her, and she made arrangements for a shuttle to pick us up, and we got off the mountain. But I know you spent the night up there, and I also think
Yeah.
Josh and Elizabeth spent the night up there somewhere.
Yes, yeah, their
And
tent ended up breaking as a result, and they had to get to town and wait a few days for a new tent.
yeah, I mean, sometimes you're too far in to the back country to simply walk out. But having an awareness when you do set up camp, how far you are. Of course, you never want to go back, but that's an option. You don't want to go back the way you came, but
Mhm.
that was definitely an option. But knowing that, hey, you're only 3 miles or 4 miles, or exactly how far you are from the next road crossing. And one of the things I want to talk about more on this channel with people is having a resource that's not on the trail, like my sister Michelle in that case. Michelle had been on trail for a month, so she was familiar with the trail community. She was familiar with how to use the Far Out Guide, familiar with how to figure out on Facebook, how to locate hostels and shuttle drivers. And so when you're in that stressful situation, she's sitting at home in North Carolina to be able to just get a message to them saying, top of Roan Mountain, weather's bad, need to get off here. Here's a road crossing. I mean, I remember the shuttle driver being impressed because within like 15 minutes, she was able to book him, get him scheduled to pick us up at our estimated time of arrival. And then she was able to contact a hostel and make us a reservation. So when we got picked up by the shuttle driver, he was commenting about how impressed he was that we were able to make that connection and get all that stuff done.
Yep.
So it's something that, if people haven't thought about it, it's a great idea. If you have a friend or family member who's, again, somewhat being familiar with the trail and the trail community is helpful, but just as a resource.
But I think, the other thing that's really nice about having your point person at home or your helper is it gives them a way to connect to the trail as well. One thing that very experienced hiker told me in Virginia that stuck with me the rest of the trail was, sometimes in the beginning, I felt bad taking so much trail magic. I
Mm,
felt sometimes guilty. Oh, this is so nice, but I feel bad these people are spending, money on food for me or, rides or whatever it was. And then I had talked to Hawk, and Hawk was like, "Remember, trail magic is not just for you, it's for them as well." Just how you're telling your family back home that, this really nice couple, grilled you burgers on the on the side of the road and, let you sit in their car to warm up on a cold day or sit in their air conditioning on a really hot day, they're telling their family as well, "Hey, I met this AT thru hiker, Night Owl. I got to help her. She was super dehydrated. I gave her a Gatorade. She sat in my car in the AC." Like, I learned very early on, it's not just for you, it's for them as well, and, with
That's a great
Michelle being
perspective. That's a great
Yeah.
perspective. That is, it makes sense. I know that people that do trail magic are getting something out of it, but you just kind of brought it home that they absolutely do, because I've done some trail magic with Sarah prior to the hike, and we plan on doing some trail magic this year. And you're right, we always do the same thing when we come home. We reflect and talk about how nice the people were that we met, and you have that good feeling that you were able to do something for them.
Yeah, and they get to kinda live through your journey and be a part of your journey, and they get to be a part of that community as well, so, having that point person or whatever, it just connects us all together, and it all kinda gives us a part of everyone's journey.
Yeah. Now, when Sarah got off the trail in Damascus, you and I pushed on. We started out the day together that next day, and went into Grayson Highlands,
Mhm.
and that was magical, even though the weather was, cold and snowy, and but it
Yes.
was magical. And then you pretty much pushed ahead, and then I didn't really see you after then. You ended up connecting with two other through hikers, Flyer and
Tuck.
Tuck. Tuck was
Yep.
the other guy. So would you talk about that? Like, you connected with these two. I knew from having conversations with you, you were interested in doing some bigger mile days. And I think that they were doing bigger mile days, if I'm remembering right.
They were, yeah, it's funny, I met Flyer unknowingly, we started the same day, February 28th, and I'll never forget coming up the approach trail, and he was, chatting in his long, drawn out Southern drawl
Yeah.
with Moose from Sweden. And I remember, blowing past them and they were talking about like type 2 fun and we all kind of chuckled and whatnot. It's like that's my first memory of meeting him. And then we always kind of leapfrogged from there on out. He ended up having to get off trail for like a week in Damascus because he had a really bad shin splint. And I had kind of caught up to him at that point because he's tall, he's athletic, he does big miles. And he and Tuck had kind of teamed up and they, again, similar miles, similar philosophies. And we ran into them again at Woods Hole. And I just always really liked them. I liked their hiking style, a lot of the same philosophy like, hey, we'll get off trail when the weather's crappy. We hike, longer days when the weather's nice. So I think when you find people that you jive with, you have to, jive with miles, personality for sure. They both were really positive, and again, some really important advice that a previous through hiker gave me was attach yourself to positive people. Because if you're hanging with people who are grumpy in Georgia already or disgruntled in Virginia, she said, wait till you see them in, like Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Like you think they're bad now, they're going to get even worse. So surround yourself by positive people. And that always stuck in the back of my head. They were positive. I think you have to kinda, connect yourself to people where it financially makes sense as well. Sometimes you'll be hiking with somebody and, maybe you have the means to get off and stay at a hostel in bad weather or stay in a hotel. And, if you're hiking maybe with some younger folks where, they just graduated from high school or college and, they're super, super strapped on cash and, maybe staying in town isn't an option. Sometimes that can be an issue if you're hiking as a group as well. So there's so many things that you have to kind of figure out that work as a group or a tramley. Everything jived with them. I was able to do the big miles that they did. However, I was always the last one to camp. And, they'd have a few hours on me where they could set up camp, cook dinner, do their chores, get water, all the things. I'd roll into camp like a train wreck at night. I'd
Yeah.
usually be the last one there, like exhausted. And they were great. A lot of times they'd throw a bear hang for me or be like, "Hey, we'll go grab your water." Like they really, took care of me like a sister and always looked out for me if I was having a rough night or rolling in late. I hung with them pretty much from like West Virginia, Pennsylvania is where we reconnected and I almost made it all the way to Maine with them, I really started to get fatigued and petered out. Kind of like in Vermont, the whites kicked my butt, and I really had only taken like 8 zeros prior to that. I took 3 zeros in a row when I got to New Hampshire. I had a friend that had a camp in Maine, and I had talked to him, and he's like, "Night Owl, you're exhausted. Like, you need to get off trail. You need to rest."
I remember texting with you because we would keep in touch, and you
Mhm.
had said I was sharing how tired I was, and you had shared that you were feeling it as well. You had only taken 8 zeros up to that point from the beginning?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I do like a lot of Neros, which is like a near
Yeah.
zero. So, maybe I'd just hike like 12 miles into town that day and take the afternoon off. But if I could do 2 things over with the trail, number 1, I would have rested more. I would have taken more
Mm.
zeros. I would have enjoyed the journey more. I just kind of had it in my mind that I had this time frame and I had to get done. And reflecting back, I wish I would've taken more zeros, more Neros, enjoyed my time on trail more than that kinda, like, get her done mentality.
I agree with that, and I've been having a hard time kind of articulating that. It's just like, I don't know how you describe, like, there's this momentum that you get caught up in after you start the trail, and I didn't have a hard date to finish by. I don't think you had a hard date either.
Mm-mm.
Some people on trail, they have to be back to school, they have a job where they have a limited time off, they have a leave of absence or something, but it's just like you get caught up in this momentum where you feel this drive to keep moving forward. And, you're hoping you don't get injured. That's
Mhm.
the big thing. And secondly, you're you you want the goal to be accomplished. You're enjoying it at the same time, but you're like, I just need to get to Virginia. And then after Virginia, for me, it was, I just need to get to Massachusetts, and then after Massachusetts, I was like, I'm in Vermont. I'm like, I've got this. I've got some of the hardest hiking coming up, but there's no way that I'm not finishing this unless I get seriously hurt. Which brings me to your story. Like, I was so upset to hear that you ended up having to get off trail, right? What happened with you once you got up to
Yeah, I entered into the 100-mile wilderness, and I was about a day behind, Flyer and Tuck, and 54, Cold had tucked in with them. And in my mind, I wanted to catch up to them and surprise them at Abol Bridge and be able to summit with them because again, with the 3 zeros I took, I was about a day behind them. I was also just mentally and physically done with the trail at that point, unfortunately. I was so fatigued. I missed my husband, I missed my dogs, I missed indoor plumbing, my own bed, my friends, my family community. Like, I was just done. And so in my mind, I just wanted to grind through the 100-mile wilderness. And I kinda entered into the 100-mile wilderness with a bad attitude. Um, and reflecting back, I think that's what all kinda contributed to my fall and my injury. So I fell with only 85 miles to go to Katahdin,
My
and
God.
it was this silly like, we've all fallen a million times. I mean, that's what you do when you're hiking, you fall and you get back
Yeah.
up. But this one I had actually tripped. There's a lot of routes in the 100-mile wilderness, and I ended up I think I was just so tired, I didn't fully pick my foot up, and there was a route across the trail, and it actually had this, like, little nubbin on the top of it, and so I went to step over the root, but my toe got stuck on the root nubbin, and I fell, and I did a lateral sprain of my ankle. I think they said it was, like, a stage 3 sprain. And I heard a loud pop when it happened, and all I could think was, "Oh my god, I've broken my ankle." Like, I've come this far
Uh,
and I've broken my ankle, and it immediately started swelling. I immediately felt pain, and I got up, and in my mind, I'm like, "Nope, nope, 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 I'm not injured, I'm not hurt, I'm gonna make it, like, I'll walk this off."
you're in
And
denial at that point.
I got a mile down the trail, and I'm like, "I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay." And then I sat down on a rock, and I'm like, "I am not okay." And I just started ugly crying, and, I was there for about a half hour, and then I heard people coming up the trail, and it turned out to be the six-pack family hikers. So
Yes, they're great.
yeah, Beacon
Yeah.
and Remy and the 4 kids, and they're like, "Night Owl, what happened?" And, I was trying to get out that I thought I either broke my ankle or sprained my ankle, and they're like, "Well, what's your plan?" And I'm like, "I don't know." So I flipped on my phone. I did have cell coverage at that point, and I called Hippie Chick and Poet at Shaw's Hiker Hostel, which one of my favorite top 5 hostels on the trail. They were
Absolutely
so
amazing. They're amazing there. Yeah.
so kind, so wonderful. I finished because of them and the help and the support that they gave me, but Hippie Chick said, "Do not go over, Chairback Mountain, whatever you do on a good day, on a good foot, like, that's a challenging mountain."
I would agree. Yeah. I spent the night on the top of Chairback Mountain at the end of my day. Yeah. So that down the next morning,
Oh,
you would have never been able to get through there with that kind of an injury. I mean,
no.
you could have done it, but it would have been
Yep,
very painful.
yep. So she had me, trace some steps back. I took a little, like, side trail down to a logging road, and Poet came and, picked me up, and when I got dropped back off there 3 weeks later after I'd gone home, rehabbed my ankle, came back way too soon. It wasn't great, but I finished. But as I kinda came back up that side trail and came back up chairback, all I could think was, like, I must have been running on adrenaline to get all the way down here with a sprained ankle because this is tough. And that first day back, I made it up and over chairback. I ended up basically boot scooting the whole rock slide down. I'd literally sit on my butt, and all I could think was like, "Great, I've got one pair of shorts, and I'm gonna blow the ass out on the."
Yeah. But that pretty much is a rock slide going down there. It is a rock slide, I think.
It is, but I think that my fall and my sprain taught me, as Preacher told me when I came back to the hostel that night injured, he said that, the trail and God is trying to teach me patience, and, they're trying to tell me to slow down, and I went home, I rehabbed, and for that 3 weeks I was off trail, I realized, like, how I had taken for granted the fact that all those months I got to be there, I got to hike the trail, I got to have that opportunity. I didn't have any major injuries, and it forced me to totally change my mindset. And when I came back to the 100-mile wilderness, I was so grateful to be there. I
Yeah.
slowed down. I did slower mileage days. I took time to talk to everybody, learn everybody's story. Before that, I was just like, I'm done. Get done. Hit the finish line. I don't care. I've got my friends. Like I said, I just entered with a really bad attitude into the 100-mile wilderness, and that fall, as much as it sucked, it changed the ending of my hike, and I ended my hike with so much more gratitude and just so much more appreciation, and it made that finish just, like, more meaningful.
It's a great story. It's a really great experience of experiencing the trail and the lessons that you learned. And
Mhm,
I would agree too, like it was so stressful when Sarah got off trail from
mhm,
Virginia up to Massachusetts it was a grind. It was a daily grind. And yeah, there were times during just about every day where you were relaxed and enjoying it. But for the most part, there's a lot of just boring hiking, you know,
mhm.
during the day. And you're fatigued, you're depressed, you're not getting enough
Hungry?
nutrition, you're hungry. But I have to say, similarly to you, that when I got to Vermont, Sarah had said, you should try to find some people to go through the whites with, try to connect with a group. And I said, yeah, I will. And so I spent the night, or I took a zero and in Rutland. And when I got to the bus station in the morning to go back on trail, is when I met two of the six family members that I ended up finishing the trail with. And so from that day forward, connecting with them, and then eventually over the next week or two with the others, some of them had been doing bigger miles. Everybody was slowing down. We kind of all just started enjoying the time on trail because at that point we knew we only had so many weeks left and we had some of the toughest hiking. But I have to say, like, that was probably the most enjoyable hiking time was from Vermont through Maine. Even though some of the toughest hiking was there,
Yeah.
you slowed down enough because you felt you were going to make it. And you had time, just enjoy this because it's going to be over with and then you're just going to be missing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things that poet said, like, he when I first entered the 100-mile wilderness, he saw my poker face and, that "I wanna be done with this," and he said, "Just remember," he said, "this is going to be a turning point in your life, and everything you do is gonna be compared to this experience." So he said, "Remember, enjoy every last second of it," and that stuck with me.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to going back on trail this year. I mean, right now, tentatively, my family's planning a kind of a reunion sometime in May down in Virginia to
Nice.
get on trail for at least a couple weeks. And I'm going to be smiling from ear to ear because the stress is gone. You know,
Mhm.
the through hike is accomplished, and now when I'm on trail, it's just going to be happy times to be out there and enjoying it. I think if I did the trail a second time, I'm not saying I'm going to, but if I did, the lessons learned from having done it successfully
Yeah.
would be huge. I would have a
Yes.
much different approach. Do you agree with that?
100%, like, you can't change your journey and, good, bad, ugly, sideways,
Yeah.
it all added up to get you to that, final moment at Katahdin, and, I really wouldn't change too much. Like I said, I would take more rest days, I would
Yes.
do a couple more side quests. I'd probably go home once, like, I
Hmm.
didn't go home at all, I saw my husband once, so whether it's going home for just a few days in the middle of the, 5, 6 months to break it up or have more visits from my husband or friends and family, I would definitely change that. One thing for me that, I learned very early on is I didn't like carrying more than 3 to 4 days of food at a crack. I found my pack got way too heavy. I was a lot slower and the miles were, more difficult. When
Hmm.
I went into the Smokies, I think I took, like, 6.5 days of food because it was early on, and a lot of people had said, "If they close Newfound Gap Road, like, you're stuck up there." And there were some storms coming and whatnot, so I packed my fears, and I packed, like, so much food, and I learned very early on, like, that I don't like to carry that heavy, so I always made it a point to be out and about, on trail, tenting, for about 3.5, 4 days, bop into town, shower, laundry, resupply, get back on trail quickly. But that was one thing that I learned quickly on that if I could, tell any perspective through hikers, your pack weight does matter and keeping your food light is really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I followed that same kind of 3.5 days on trail. Get off, resupply, shower, laundry, back on trail. And I did something similar too with you with used a lot of Nero days instead of taking full zeros. And I agree. I would take more 0 days for recovery, for
Mhm,
physical recovery, and force yourself to eat higher in that
mhm.
0 day. Just carb up and get as much nourishment as you can, so that when you go back on trail, you're at least better than you would be. Because it's hard to put back all those calories that you're
It
burning every
is,
day.
yeah.
So I
Yep.
know I know you used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and what I'm really curious to hear about here is about your trail dogging company. How did that come about, and can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so like you said, I was in pharmaceutical sales for almost 20 years and had had enough, just really toxic work environment. I was kind of in survival mode every day, just, getting through the day and, poor management. And I just decided, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like, just getting up and getting through your day is not a way to live your life, even though it is a job. And, not all jobs are always going to be, just a wonderful, great, happy day, but it had gotten really bad. And so I quit, and it was the first time in my life that I didn't have a plan or a next step or I just kinda quit, I'd had enough, and I immediately just started hiking again. I mean, I'd always been outdoorsy, I'd always been active, grew up going to YMCA camps where we'd go, backpacking and camping, mm, and so I just got back out there, and I went on 2 pretty epic, life-changing, trips on the Appalachian Trail. one in the Grayson Highlands, and one in the 100-mile wilderness, and it was with a women's backpacking group, and they had actually said to me, "Hey, had you ever thought about guiding?" And I was like, "No, not interested. I'm flattered, but thank you." And then that kinda stuck in the back of my head, and I knew that to be a guide, you needed to get certified as a wilderness first responder, and I thought, "You know what? I'm just gonna check this out because I wanna have these skills because I'm spending more and more time outside myself, and if I can help somebody, if I come across somebody who's got an injury or maybe having a mentally off day or whatever, like, I wanna know these skills that I can use in the backcountry to help myself and help others." So, I went and I got my woofer certification, and I really enjoyed it. I met some amazing people, made some great connections, and then I started doing some contract guiding for a couple outfits and really enjoyed it, and I thought, "You know what? I wanna do this, but I kinda wanna do this on my own." I always kinda had that, like, entrepreneurial spirit, and I'd always wanted to, start my own thing, so I started Trail Dog& and Company in 2023 and, just started guiding friends, family, people in my community, and people started to notice and like, "What are you doing? Like, I see what you're doing on social media. Looks like fun, and how do I get to be a part of this?" And, it just kinda took off from there. And I primarily guide women. That's like 95% of my business. I do guide a co-ed trip out in Yellowstone every year. But for me, my main interest is guiding women just because it's near and dear to my heart. And that's what got me out there. And just being around, like, strong and inspiring women, that's kinda what made me think, "Well, if they're out there doing this, why can't I be out there doing this as well?" You have to put in the work, get the trainings, the certifications, test your skills, and I just hope that people see what I've done and where I've come from, that you can do it too, and you don't have to wait for somebody to do this stuff with. Like, everybody asks me, like, "Did you start the trail alone?" And I'm like, "Yes, I did," because to try to find somebody that's, the same pace as you, the same, finances, the same time frame, the same personality of somebody who wants to take a 0 the same day that you do, it's very challenging to do that. So you just have to get out there on your own. And I hope that people see this and they think like, "Okay, she's done that. I can do that too."
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're open to hiking with others, you'll find people very quickly on trail that, match your hiking style, your miles. And certainly I know of many people on trail that kind of altered a little bit of their hiking style in order to stay with a family or to stay with people that they really enjoyed spending time with. And I found a lot of value in the times I was alone as well. But I
Yeah.
think kind of dipping in and out of those relationships as you make your way up the trail is a good thing. It's
Yeah.
a really good thing.
Yeah. I would just say class of 2026, first of all, you're getting out there and you're trying. That's the first thing. Just get out there and get moving and take it day by day and mile by mile, as cliche as it sounds, and just try. You never know what you're going to be able to accomplish, and just be proud of every little accomplishment. Like, my I think favorite milestone on the trail was like hitting my first 100 miles. Like, I was
Yeah.
so you remember coming up Albert Mountain and you see the 100 on the
Yeah.
side of the tower? Like, that to me was just like, yeah! Like, I swear I was almost more excited about 100 miles than I was, like, 2,000 miles. Like, there was something just so meaningful, and I put so much grit into that first 100 miles. But always have something to look forward to, whether it's hitting a 100-mile mark or hitting a new state or getting to town that day and having a burger with your friends. Like, just make sure every single day you have one thing that you're looking forward to, and that will keep you going.
I think that's great advice for sure. And just accept the fact that you're going to have difficult days, you're going to have difficulties on trail and stay positive, stay focused, push through those days and times and ask for help.
Yes.
If you need help, whether it's support, ask for help. If you find that piece of equipment's not working out for you, you can pop into gear shops along the way, and address issues that come up. But yeah, I wish all the best to the class of 2026. Seems like the numbers are even lower than last year, 2025 so far, and our numbers were down from previous years.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I mean, it's initially I watched Ramdino, the numbers, they look like they're down compared to this time last year.
Interesting.
So I don't know if that's a trend or what. I had thought maybe last year a lot of people were waiting because of all the hurricane damage from Helene, and maybe they had put it off to 2026, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. What would you say, like, your highest high on the trail was other than summiting and your lowest low? Like, what would you say those 2 days were for you?
Well, I think that my lowest low was definitely in Virginia, and I loved Virginia. Don't get me wrong. Virginia was beautiful and it was springtime and I really liked being on trail and watching the seasons change, going from winter into spring and seeing all the wildflowers and everything blooming. And but I just got, really homesick and depressed, and Sarah made
And
it for
Noro.
5 yeah, 500
Little thing
miles with
called Noro.
yeah. Well, yeah, and then added that to it too, the norovirus, um, and yeah, and then when I got up here to Massachusetts, I contracted Lyme disease. So I don't know if I picked that up in Connecticut or Mass, but I became symptomatic with that. And
I'm
the day I went up
sorry.
and over Greylock, I knew something was wrong with me because I mean, should not be this difficult. I mean, I've done this hike before. I don't feel right, and I had been waking up the night before with some cold sweats, and
Ugh,
so I knew I had something wrong with me. But yeah, so I would say the low points were definitely that stretch between Virginia, the Shennys, and Massachusetts, and then I kind of hit a reset button once I got to Massachusetts. And the
yeah,
highs for me were definitely New Hampshire and Maine. I just really enjoyed the hiking, and we were fortunate. We had great weather. Um, I think we took a zero, an extra zero one day before we started Franconia Ridge because the weather was going to be bad, and so we waited an extra day, and we just hit really good weather, and that made it
nice.
much more enjoyable. And yeah, I think that the last, New Hampshire and Maine, those states, I had a better mindset, I guess, and was the most memorable. Yeah. How about you? What was your high point and your low point? Obviously, the low point's probably the injury.
Yeah, I mean, the ankle was definitely a low point. I got hit with norovirus in Virginia like you. We were 2 of 26 hikers that I knew of in Virginia that all got norovirus, and that was the first time that I cried on trail. Luckily, when I got noro, I was in a hotel room.
Mm,
I'd heard so many horror stories of people, getting in the middle of the night, it's raining, and they've got, 7 miles to hike to a road crossing to even be picked up. But Noro really knocked me down and it made me, like you said, homesick. I you know, just wanted to get out of the hotel room, but I didn't feel good enough to get on the trail. And it was just kind of this 3 days of no man's land. And then I got back on trail and I was so far behind everybody that I knew. I'd kinda lost my
yeah.
friends and my tramily, and, I was just so fatigued for, like, probably a week and a half after Noro. So that was probably a low point. High point was, gosh, I would say just being after I fell and sprained my ankle, just being able to come back and finish that final 85 miles, and I was alone most of the 100-mile wilderness. I met people along the way, but never really tucked in with anybody because I was just doing a lot lower mileage because of my injury, and I'm just trying to enjoy that last stretch of the journey, and then I made it to A-Ball Bridge, and, Sir Stops-A-Lot was there doing trail magic, and he had, like, fried chicken
My
and cut
god, he had the best trail magic. He and Fresh Grounds, but Sir
yes.
Stops a Lot was doing an awesome job out there.
He was amazing, and he was just like the nourishment for my soul that I needed at that moment, And I was sitting there, just like going to town on my fried chicken. And there was a guy at the Trail Magic named Falling Leaf. And he's like, Night Owl? And I just stared at him. I'm like, I know that face. I know that name. Where did I meet him? And he was so skinny. I hadn't seen him for a month and his beard was just bigger and he was so skinny. And I was like, oh my gosh, we had met back in the Whites and reconnected. And we ended up summiting Katahdin together along with his awesome friend Snack Pack and two friends of his that came and day hiked Katahdin with us. But I was so grateful to have that moment where I could reconnect with Falling Leaf and also know that I wasn't summiting Katahdin alone because it's challenging. I mean, there are sections where you're pulling yourself up on rebar. You need a boost, you need a hand. So just being able to like come back, have that moment of gratitude and reconnect with people that, I knew from earlier in the trail was really cool. That was a high point.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for being my first guest here on this, again, attempt at starting a podcast. And I hope to do more of these. Looking forward to connecting with you at some point this year. Sarah and I
Yeah.
are going to find our way to Wisconsin. And I don't know, do you have any plan on going to trail days this year?
Yes, I will be there. I will definitely be there. So hopefully I'll see you guys there as well.
Yeah, I'm planning on going. My youngest graduates May 15th, which is that Friday.
Okay.
So I'm gonna try to work it out where I fly down in to into Damascus area for Saturday. But I will be there. I will be there. I definitely want to go. I didn't want to get off trail last year and travel there and then travel back. And
Me neither.
so it's definitely something I'm looking forward to this year. Thank you again very much. And I look forward to seeing you at Trail Days in May.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And like we talked before the podcast, like keep sharing your story. You've got such an interesting perspective, to hiking the AT and just keep sharing it because people want to hear your experience and you have a unique experience. And I'm just truly honored to be here and honored to know you and Compass and have that amazing friendship from the trail. So thank you.